So, today, before I get into my thoughts on the State of the Union and a few other topics as well, I did just want to say that I really think Lauren Boebert as a person sucks. Just really a bad person. And I usually don't take personal attacks lightly. I usually try to stay away from just calling someone bad because I don't know them. But I've always been taught most of my life, and I think a lot of people have, that if someone tells you who they are, believe them. And I know I focus on Marjorie Taylor Greene a lot, who I also think is just despicable in her values, ethics, and just sense of debate and conversation and treating other people. But, Lauren Boebert, I don't think gets enough credit just being on that asshole list because she really is as well. But, anyways, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because last night during the State of the Union, Biden was talking about burn pits in Iraq, which, side note, I'm glad he finally is talking about. We can probably thank Jon Stewart for that. But Biden was talking about what they've done to our troops, how there's links with cancer once they get back. And he also talked about his son, Beau Biden, who obviously died of a very rare form of brain cancer. He was in Kosovo and then in the Middle East around some of these burn pits. The correlation could be there. Who knows if there's causation, but you know what I mean. And while Biden was talking about this, Lauren Boebert shouted out something like, "Under your watch, 13 died." Just despicable. I don't have the video on me right now because I couldn't find it out of the whole speech. But yeah, Biden just brings up burn pits and how we need to take better care of our veterans. And Boebert yells, 13 under your watch. And luckily, the majority of everyone in the room booed. I saw Lindsey Graham looked pretty disgusted as well, I guess. But that might have been a big low point, whatever you want to call it, in any State of the Union, to be honest, because, we all know Biden lost a son. I don't think Biden purposefully is causing burn pits. It's not even part of his responsibility. And, it just shows the lowbrow demeanor of these people, And I don't think anyone's going to stand up to her on the Republican side. I highly doubt Kevin McCarthy will do anything because he's pretty much been hijacked by that wing of the party. As we see every time Marjorie Taylor Greene, denounces the Holocaust or makes anti-Semitic statements, no one condemns her on that part of the party. So it'll probably be the same here. But anyway, she's a child. Madison Cawthorn and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar, these people are awful, and it's really just the lowbrow of our politics. And I really hope we could start moving away from that, but it looks like it's the opposite. But anyways, I do want to thank you guys for joining me today. As always, Centered from Reality podcast, Alex Kapitko here, and it is Wednesday. If you're not watching, which most of our listens come from the podcast, not YouTube. But if you're not watching, I'm wearing a tropical shirt. It's sunny and 59 out today. It's getting into the afternoon here. Sun's been staying out a little bit longer. All is good. I got a nice run in, got a good workout in. I've been working on a paper and some other work. And it's a pretty good Wednesday so far. So today I want to give my thoughts on the State of the Union, which I actually sat through last night, and then give you guys some probably thoughts on the special election that happened yesterday in Texas, which I think will maybe give us some insight about the midterms. And then I also want to talk about Rick Scott, Florida senator, and this agenda, this Republican platform he's put out with 11 points. And it's a little worrying. Anyways, I also will just start by saying, unfortunately, it really does look like Putin and the Russian army, and the Belarusian army, I guess, as well, are really starting to target civilians. And people were also forced to pick a side today. Only 4 countries sided with Russia, which were Syria, North Korea, Belarus, and Eritrea. So not the high caliber axis of evil, but so the rest of the world either stayed neutral or voted on the side of Ukraine. But it's looking like Russia might now have the upper hand in this. So I know it sounds cliche, but my thoughts and prayers really are with them. it's really heartbreaking, and I really do see the worst is coming. But anyways, to start, let's just go through some of the takeaways from the State of the Union, which happened last night. I'll start with just my main takeaway, which is that I think Biden did pretty well. He always seems to rise to the occasion. But to me, it honestly felt less like a State of the Union and more like kind of a wish list of everything he wished that they had accomplished in the year. It seemed more like Biden's goals, almost like a campaign speech in a way. It was basically like Biden's narrative was good, I think, for the majority of the State of the Union. But it didn't feel like a State of the Union because all the things he was talking about really haven't happened. It felt like a campaign rally or kind of a push for the midterms going ahead. So, yeah, it was interesting to watch. But let's just kind of start at the top with you. So, yeah, as aforementioned, the State of the Union did start with Ukraine, which was obvious. I know before it actually began, some of us were worried that maybe he was going to talk about it the entire time and forget other issues. He didn't. He spent, about 10, 15 minutes talking about the state of Ukraine, I guess. And I think he did a really good job because he condemned Putin. He spoke up in our solidarity with the Ukrainian people, but he also made it clear that combat from American forces is not on the table. And it seemed like everyone was kind of on the same page there. Obviously, in the entire nation, there's going to be people that disagree, but it sounded like there was a main consensus that he did a good job in that. He spent some time talking about the strength of Ukraine, and I thought he had a great line when he talked about how Putin had really messed up because he met the Ukrainian people. And obviously, he didn't calculate for their response. And yeah, I think it was a clear message that we are working with our allies and we are working with the European Union, and Putin will pay. And as I mentioned earlier, only 4 nations voted on Russia's side. They are all either autocratic nations, very poor nations, or completely isolated nations. So probably not the allies Putin wishes he had, But all jokes aside, I think it was really good. He moved on too, which was good because obviously we have. Also, sorry, my connection cut out there a little bit, but I think it's all caught up. But anyways, Jill Biden was also there, obviously, Joe Biden's wife. I don't know why I had to clarify that, but she invited the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, Oksana Markarova. And I've actually been following her on the news and in literature the last couple days because I think she's been very moving with her speeches and her just articulate responses about, hey, what the fuck is happening here? Excuse my language. I know I'm not supposed to cuss too much on this, so sorry, family, if you're listening. But anyways, this was symbolic, Everyone gave her a standing ovation. I thought it was powerful, all the Ukrainian flags there. Again, unfortunately, not really much can be done right now. I'm seeing just the death toll starting to spike, and I have to say that Markarova, she looked beaten down, I can't even imagine what they've been going through the last couple days. But, I think it was a nice gesture to bring her there at least. Moving on, another notable part of the speech was Biden talking about infrastructure. He had a good clickbaity line, which was like, we are not talking about infrastructure weeks, but an infrastructure decade, which honestly I think is right because I'm sure a lot of you have seen our infrastructure like bridges, roads, dams. They always are getting constant D's and F's in terms of grading. We are seeing bridges like in Pittsburgh collapse. It's clear we need to focus on infrastructure. About a month ago, you should check it out. I also talked about STEM technology, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, bringing those to Rust Belt areas. I think Biden did a good job emphasizing how we need to focus on the Rust Belt and turn it into a new area of economic growth. All of that comes from infrastructure spending and Build Back Better, which he hasn't passed, but he sure did talk about a lot. But it was interesting too to me because the first half of the speech where he was talking about this and Ukraine and drug prices, which I'll get to in a second, it was quite populist. This is not something I could even imagine like a Bill Clinton or an Obama or definitely a Hillary Clinton talking about. And let's be honest, I don't think Biden's a populist by any means. But what it does show me is that the party has really changed directions, like the Republican Party, probably in more more productive ways. But he had some powerful stuff here. I really liked some of this first half of the speech. Now, the second half we'll get into in a minute. I didn't. But anyways, he had a 13-year-old named Joshua who has diabetes, needs insulin on a daily basis. Biden turned it into a bigger conversation about how we need to let Medicare negotiate the cost of drugs. I saw a lot of frowns from Republicans. Even our friend from Maine, Susan Collins, did not look too thrilled. So clearly that probably struck a nerve with a lot of Republicans. But to be honest, I agreed with it. I thought it was a good point. Again, part of that populist, more leaning message where it's like, hey, it costs the pharmaceutical companies $10 to make insulin, but it costs it costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars for American families. And I understand intellectual property and research and development. I do. I understand that you need to keep the profits high so you can pay for this to happen. I do get it, but at the same time, it's exploitation. And so I enjoyed his conversation about infrastructure. He wanted to get rid of the idea of the Rust Belt, drug prices, having Medicare negotiate. I thought all of these were quite effective. He also talked about more tests are going to be available. Tests, I mean COVID tests. This one I found somewhat interesting because I've been personally mad about this for a while because the administration was behind, like very behind on tests during the Omicron wave. They were behind on N95 masks, KN95 masks, when the research had been out there, when we knew another variant was coming, and they were still very behind. And so Biden said, well, we gave out those 4 free tests to every American. In my head, I'm thinking, yeah, you did, but by the time you did, the wave was over because, I got COVID at the end of the year into early 2022. It took me a week just to find out if I had COVID or not because of testing shortages and just kind of chaos, to be completely honest. And I'm glad that Biden's administration now has announced that there's going to be more tests available, families can get more tests, and he's being preemptive this time. He's saying there's no new variant, but we are ready with stockpiles if there are. Now, this is something that I call learning. Something that I wish more people did is they've seen that there was a problem, they've taken the criticism, and they're moving forward. I was one of the many who condemned his testing and mask production strategy after Delta. But it looks like they are acknowledging it and moving forward, and I think that's the sign of a leader. Like Biden or not, I thought that was a pretty good initiative. Also, he got applause from both sides later on talking about good police reform, which I think all of us agreed with. He said it's not about defunding the police, it's about refunding the police in better ways. I can just see the Republicans and the moderates like myself clapping, and I can see the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars frowning, and I love it. Also, we got to see Biden give quite a moving little speech about Justice Breyer, who's retiring. I don't know that much about Justice Breyer, to be completely honest. He seems like just kind of a likable old man, at least from what I've seen. And he is leaving. Looks like he was starting to get emotional. And Kajani Jackson was there. The whole Supreme Court was there. Biden threw a few snipes about abortion. And we saw Amy Coney Barrett. Didn't look too thrilled. Side note, if anyone listening can answer this for me, I'm not aware, but why is it the Supreme Court never claps? I kept looking over during the speech. Everyone else would stand up or clap. I mean, even Kevin McCarthy stood up and clapped a few times, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene yelled, "Build the wall" at some point. Like, everyone was involved some way or another here. But the Supreme Court, even the Democrats on the Supreme Court, kind of just sat there. I was somewhat surprised about that, but whatever. But if anyone knows why that's the case, I'd be curious to know. Or is it because they're supposed to be this, more important metaphysical body that's above elected officials? I don't know. But yeah. Anyways, Biden talked about immigration reform. This is where I saw less people stand and clap. He said we need to secure our border, which clearly goes against the Fox narrative that he's been part of the problem. Now, I think that's bullshit because as we can go over the just data that It's really bipartisan. I mean, Trump had border issues and dealt with it in a very inhumane way. Inhumane way. Biden's pretty much done the same. I mean, what was it back in September or October? I don't even know. Time's weird, but where they had border patrol on horses, literally trying to round up the Haitian refugees or migrants, whatever you want to call them. It's kind of a bipartisan issue, and Biden said we need immigration reform. Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert. I've seen conflicting reports on who said it, but it was one of them. I will promise you it was one of them. But one of them yelled, "Build that wall," which the wall was never built. It was not going well. It's actually very stupid and outdated to think that a wall would stop these problems. A lot of people come on airplanes. Last time I checked, walls don't stop airplanes. But we have cyber technology. We have digital walls, if you want to call it that. Physical walls are not the problem. But anyways, I as I started at the top of the show, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Lauren Boeberts, that's not part of their agenda. It's common sense. I thought the second half, like I already said, I thought the second half of this State of the Union was just kind of like a big campaign rally. It was like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and build back better, build back better. Congress needs to pass voting reform, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Congress, we need to work on on voting reform. We need to work on border patrol reform, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, is this the State of the Union, though? Because none of this has passed, and, the Republicans are slowly taking back seats, probably. So what's the point of this? But I did think in the second half there was one good part where Biden said here, we agree on a lot more things than we acknowledge. And he did something that I don't think gets a lot of coverage because neither CNN or Fox News or any of those type of news apparatuses, if you want to call it news, they don't cover stories where there's a bipartisan passing of a bill, right? And I think Biden had a good point, is that he mentioned that they've signed into law 80 bipartisan bills, right? And yeah, I don't think that's covered too much in the mainstream news, no matter what side you're on. And that is something we need to emphasize, is that, the culture war has made things so toxic. The Marjorie Taylor Greenes yelling, build that wall, or Lauren Boebert saying, well, you killed the troops. Neither one are true or even adding anything to the conversation. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're all throwing mud at this point. And so when you think about the fact that Biden has, under his administration, helped pass over 80 bipartisan laws, yeah, I think that's a good thing to mention. That is a State of the Union. Not some of the, we need to still pass Build Back Better. You didn't. You can't even rally your own party. Your margins are slim, not sleek. It's interesting. And the last thing I'll say is that Biden offered his unity agenda after he talked about bipartisanship. And, some of these were good, like beating the opioid epidemic, which was the first one, talking about harm reduction, prevention, outdated drug laws, stopping the illicit flow of drugs, which can go towards immigration, and the war on drugs, which needs to be over, get better help to the addicted. I mean, all of this comes back to healthcare as well. I mean, if you get prescribed oxycodone or something from a doctor, you get addicted to it, run out and, resort to street-level drugs like heroin. Then also you would need to pay for medical help to probably go to rehab or get that problem alleviated. And maybe a lot of people can't afford to do that. So it's just the cycle of like medical care, medical treatment, our healthcare system, I think, are part of it. Biden talked about mental health, especially with children, which I think during the pandemic has been something we have all seen, whether it's personally or just anecdotally or through the news. Mental health is on the rise. Deaths of despair are creeping up on this nation. And I think this actually goes back to the opioid epidemic, because I think a lot of these things are associated. San Francisco, for example, actually had more opioid deaths than COVID deaths over that, I think it was the 2020 to 2021 period. And these things are all related, and I'm glad he talked about them. He also talked about support for our veterans, which is where we got to hear Lauren Boebert make that lovely comment. And his last one was, let's end cancer as we know it. Obviously, he has a stake in the game. A lot of us do. Pretty much every one of us does in some way or another. I like he didn't just say let's end cancer. He's like, let's end it as we know it, because as people I'm sure are aware, there are specific types of cancer that we're getting very close to being able to treat at a very effective level. So, Yeah, the State of the Union was the State of the Union. It's nothing that's going to change my opinion on either party. It just kind of solidified my views. A moment I didn't mention was also, Biden talked about inflation, which I think was actually part of the populist half, where he talked about how the meatpacking industries are manipulating prices, the shipping industry. He said something along the lines of capitalism without competition is exploitation. I think that is interesting and honestly quite populist again, because I'm glad to hear he's changing his tone on inflation because I've been reading about it for a while, and clearly there is just natural inflation, transitory inflation, if you want to call it. But there's also companies that have fixed the prices because they have a clear monopoly. Or not a monopoly, monopolistic competition, right? There's competition amongst 3 or 4 companies. And that's what we are seeing, and Biden mentions it. He talks about how in a lot of the Midwest, there's only like 3 or 4 meat packing companies, and they've fixed the prices and maybe artificially adding to inflation. And I'm glad he addressed that. Same with the shipping companies. He mentions that as well. There's only like 3 or 4 shipping companies. I read about that in the Atlantic as well. And they might be artificially embedding this crisis to make it worse. So, I think that it was interesting to see someone like Biden actually take some of these stances. Also, like another takeaway, wrapping this segment up, is that Biden stumbled a few times. There were parts where he coughed or slipped up on a word, and to be honest, I think everyone's thinking about it too much. Fox News is back to the dementia line. People are like, "Oh, it really took away from his speech." I'm kind of sick of people making fun of him for it. When I was younger, personally, this connects with me. I stuttered or would trip up on words, especially speaking in public, or there were certain words or vowels or whatever that would just trip you up. And if you keep trying to say it fast, you're just going to keep tripping up. So sometimes you have to slow down, start over, and take a moment for yourself. And over time, I've taught myself to do that through practice with speaking. And that's what I saw Biden doing. Is he obviously learned a technique for slowing down, saying it again, or starting over. And he's acknowledged that he had a speech problem, and he's worked on it his whole life. And I think it's just disingenuous to attack him for it, to be honest. Like, it was clear to me that he's mentally there. He's just older and also has had a speech problem the majority of his life. And he's never been known as being just a great articulate speaker. But to me, the message got across, and I think it's just a petty, disingenuous attack at this point. And back to what I said at the beginning. The speech was optimistic and all, but I keep thinking back to the midterms that I can't see any of the things that he wants happening before the midterms. Again, this seemed more like a campaign rally than an actual State of the Union, It just seemed like he believed he could still rally people together, and so far I've not seen that happening. It seemed like a wish list or fever dreams from a man who knows his party might have a really big ass whooping in the midterms. So overall, I would give the speech B minus. Probably B, if I'm being generous. I'd give the first half a B plus and the second half a C plus. So let's go with a B. Let's go with a B, B minus. Like, how about a good 83%? I'd give him an A for effort, though. And I still, when I watch him speak, I do understand why he appealed to people after Trump, myself included. But I still think he has an uphill battle, and yeah, I'll just end it with that. But, the media coverage has been the same. CNN and ABC doing their fact checks to make themselves look credible, basically saying he did a good job. Fox attacking his gaffes. The Wall Street Journal saying he has some shortfalls economically. Not much else to take away from that.